Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Russell Hill, for another exciting episode of WTF, and that's What the FixedOPS.
And hello, I am Charity Dunning. I'm the co-host here at WTF, and today we have Brian Kramer. Brian, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yes.
So I'm Brian Kramer. I work for cars.com now. I'm out of retail. I'm the EVP of cars, one of them, and I'm the general manager of AccuTrade as well.
Wow. So just to break it down, and I may be wrong, but so when we first set this up with Brian, and incidentally, we are really humbled and honored to have you on today. We're going to do what we can to find out about the man, the myth, the legend. A lot of you that follow us probably know Brian, and we hope maybe today that you're going to uncover some tidbits that you haven't heard about him. But EVP, is that Executive Vice President of Cars.com?
Yes, I wasn't sure about it either when it was all happening.
Okay.
I was more about what are we going to be doing and what are we? That's a longer. I don't want to hijack your question, but that's a much longer conversation.
Yeah, no problem. But when I first met you, you were, when I first met you, like online like this, was in the mastermind. Okay, with Dave Ford. And you've been on subsequently, and we bumped into each other several times. I think briefly.
Digital dealer,
exactly. But you were with Jermaine Toyota, and that was an extremely successful dealership. And then now you're with Executive Vice President of Cars.com. That's quite a transition for you, isn't it?
It definitely is. I was already working with a lot of people a lot smarter than me, but I'm definitely working with a lot more people, thousands of them that they know things, a lot of things that I don't know. It's definitely out of my comfort zone. Done the same thing for 27 years, all I've ever known, from washing cars and getting onboarded through car dealerships. And so I worked for AutoNation for 5 years, but going to cars.com, which is it's a technology company technically, right. And it's a software company. So there's software engineers and project managers and all these different jobs that I still don't know exactly what all they do and what they do. I know they do amazing things. My job, and where I integrate with this, is they generate so much traffic and they do so many amazing things, just like being at Google or Microsoft or something, right? So they're building all this stuff and architecting it. So what's been cool for me is to give them another perspective from the other side as to, after they do all that work, what happens when, it's just like driving traffic through a service drive. What happens when that client arrives? Is it simple and easily executable, or do they just dismiss the opportunity, or does it happen the way they intended to do? Because they can set the table, but they can't eat the meal for whoever's receiving that lead.
Yeah, it's really I heard you this morning on Clubhouse about we were talking about recruiting and the onboarding process, and you personally are involved in that, which is phenomenal. When you were running stores, but you started where? Actually washing cars, is that right? Is that how it all started? Or
started off washing cars at Tom Gill Oldsmobile in Columbus, Ohio.
I'll be darned.
Nice.
In high school.
So did Sean Armour. That's his roots too.
His roots, yeah.
He's not old enough to, or he's not old enough to be an Oldsmobile.
No.
Washing cars.
No. So I know that I also got a chance to watch your phenomenal breakout session at Digital Dealer on all the pioneering, cutting edge stuff you're doing. To me, I think this is, I really do believe that you're extremely good and notable stuff that you've accomplished at the dealership level, running a very successful store, surrounding yourself with an awesome team, because that's what it's all about, right? Having the right team, empowering them, etc. And then to step way outside of your comfort zone like this. Can you share anything that you may have gone through mentally, etc., on stepping way out here like that? What it's done for you?
Yeah, it's and I'm an open book, but I did that by there's some time I missed all but like 2 or 3 of my daughter's volleyball games, and she's hyper competitive. She's doing extremely well. Uh, and I've
Who'd
only
she
got
get that from?
her mother.
All right.
But so I've got 3 years left with her. So, and I got my youngest daughter, the oldest Ava, and my youngest is Morgan, but she's coming right up behind her. So I I just realized that I've only got that small window. I'm going to take advantage of it. I haven't taken advantage of that this whole time, but it was a tough decision I've ever made to walk away from that, because that team, not to, you don't say it's on autopilot, but that team was, and that team knew exactly what was going on. It was just no different than a really strong military unit where everybody knows, or an offensive line, or whatever analogy you want to use, where this person knows what this person does. And when there's that deep trust, like we talked about this morning,
Sure.
that develops, and you don't have to question, is that person going to do their job? Is that person going to call the person back? It just happened, right? So the step away from that was beyond uncomfortable.
But they depend on you. And I talked briefly about it, and I'm a firm believer, and people need to be held accountable. They need to be empowered. Obviously, you need to let them do what they need to do. And I think maybe it was you. I think it was you this morning, may have been somebody else, but there was a time when I was running stores, and with going through experiences, you get a lot of wisdom. But at one point in time, I thought I needed to know how to do it all. Okay. And then I found over time that really there's only about 3 things I'm really good at, and surround myself with people that know just as much or more than I do. And that's what they do. Those are the things that they do best that I don't do. It makes it for a phenomenal team. Did you operate that way?
Not early in my career, but it's funny that you say that, because we did that whole thing with that digital retail and the sales side, right, during COVID.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point, and that's when I was jumping on, learning from all of you on that mastermind group with Foy. And
Yep.
I'm picking your brain, picking Ed Roberts' brain, and I'm just trying to suck that up every Tuesday out like a sponge. And I was learning so much, and I'm going back and implementing it. But I couldn't just go back there. I wrote service in 1994 at a Mr. Goodrich, and so of course everybody's like, "What do you know?" That was before computers, so everything's changed. You're just like what's happened to me right now with being out of retail. Well, that might have worked back then, and it's like it was 6 weeks ago. But
yeah,
but so I'm going to lose that at some point. But when I would go over to service, I'd say, "Hey, why do we do this?" And I couldn't just say, "Hey, you should do this way," because maybe in many times they did have a better way to do it. But I had to do that Socratic method of asking them, "Why do you do this?" and help me understand this. And when it's harder to do that when you come up through sales and you have every position. When I didn't do that in service, I understood it, and I had hired Lloyd Schiller and had gone through all the school and everything, and spent when I was at a Chevrolet store in Clearwater, 80% of the time in fixed ops, and same thing at the Lexus store, but I hadn't actually done it. So there was also that insecurity of, well, they're going to say, which I'm happy to pick up the phone and call for a tire no sale, decline
Exactly.
outcomes, but there's always that fear in the back of your mind that an ASM or somebody's going to say, well, what do you know about that? But once I finally just got okay with it, which is really all I've been doing at cars, because what I learned in the service department at the Toyota store has really helped me out in this current role, because I'm okay. It's public knowledge. I don't know software engineering, nor do I need to, but I know how to ask people questions to understand why do we do things. And a lot of times, like at that Toyota store, why do we do this way? They go, I don't know. That's just how it works. And then, well, how do you, in a perfect world, how would it work? But everybody's so busy sawing all the time, they don't stop to sharpen the blade. So I think that's one of the team is the first most important thing, trust. And then the next most important thing is asking those questions. And I think it was like a superpower back in service, because I really didn't know what the answer was. And they kept on thinking, just tell me where you're going with this. And I'm like, no, I really want to know, because I need you to teach me how it should work and where the roadblocks are, so I can remove them to make you go faster.
Yeah. I grew up on the variable side. I think that probably 85%, correct me if I'm wrong.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. I worked for Van Tile for many, many, many years back in the late 80s, I was in retail for 16 years running stores, or worked my way.
I knew that, but I thought you came up through fixed.
No. It's amazing. I got a technology company for fixed operations, but I'm a variable guy. But no, listen. So it's really funny.
Wow.
Yeah. So see, there's some things you don't know, and well, I'd like to explore some things, later on down the road too, but obviously not today. No, I'm not. I know a lot about it, but I like you. I surrounded myself. I wanted to know how to remove the obstacles, make it more efficient. But yeah, I'm a sales guy.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I really kind of thought everybody knew that, but I guess I didn't. So I think that for me, stepping outside of the comfort zone is where I've experienced the most growth, spiritually, financially, mentally, physically. I mean, there's a lot involved there. And you mentioned earlier about the people you're surrounded by, and it might be or could be, maybe not now, it's somewhat intimidating because you can't write or whatever it is that.
Oh no, it is. It is.
Yeah. But they
I'm just more
equally are
transparent
probably
there.
that way about you too. I mean, you're bringing something, so you're still feeling your way through, or do you have a path, or you're just kind of absorbing and finding out what your niche or role? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I had to get a habit, and you always obviously go back to things that the wisdom, the mistakes that you made before.
Sure.
It's no different than when you first became a manager or GSM or a GM, or the bigger the operation, or the more stuff that was going on, the more organization that had to occur. And I knew there had to be a daily cadence, a weekly cadence, a monthly cadence that tie back into the lead measures and lag measures like we were talking about this morning.
Sure.
To make sure that everybody's clear on what's supposed to happen, and it's consistent, that you don't change the game up every single week and it's erratic, and there has to be a pattern, obviously, right, to the system. And they expect, okay, we're going to do this, and then at this point they're going to ask this question, and if we don't know how many appointments we had at the end of the night, and there's going to be some conversations about that in the morning, and I better come to the doc meeting knowing my numbers, because if not, that's going to be uncomfortable, and all those things that go with it. I just had to figure out, kind of like when I went from variable to being, a GM, and initially there's typically somebody carrying you during that process. But
True.
then I had to figure out what drives revenue, and what drives dollars per RO, and taking out maintenance versus diagnostic labor, and being able to have a steady way to be able to hold people accountable. Know if this falls off this is going to affect this. It's the same way in software. If we don't have enough pipeline, and we're not keeping up with our automation and all these things that were never even on my radar before, that have to move in order to make sure that it's all elastic too, that it's not going to break because of the software I'm pretty sure acquired.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How long have you been with cars.com?
6 weeks.
Oh wow, you're brand new. What are you've mentioned a few here and there, but what do you find are some of the toughest challenges so far going from a GM to an EVP?
That you can't, same thing that happened when I became a GM or I went into a bigger store. You can't do it all yourself, and you have to rely even more on your people, and it's all getting things done through others. Right now, it's like trying to repair an engine on an airplane mid-flight, because we're trying to scale up so fast, so quickly, and it's so much excitement, and there's a lot of positive things going on, especially with AccuTrade, with the vehicle acquisitions. It's a real hot sector, but to make sure that we have enough, infrastructure, make sure we're not building a house on top of sand, that we got a strong foundation, and it takes a lot of discipline. It's how we did digital retail and the digital transformation in the service department at the Toyota store.
Yeah,
you got to say no to a lot of things that you want to say yes to, and that everybody's pushing you on, because everything, everybody thinks that one thing, the thing that affects them is the most important. So trying to prioritize and be able to explain to them the big picture of what the common goal is. And if you want us to do this, we're gonna have to remove this. So of all these things, which one should we remove to replace that with? Yeah. And they always look at it and, well, none of that. That's all critically important.
Well, I think what I've noticed about, I could be wrong. We haven't spent other than 1 minute any real one-on-one time or anything like that, but I do follow you, and I've watched you present a couple times, and you're exchanging back and forth on different shows and stuff like that, like the Mastermind. And you embrace technology. And I think it's real important. You know who Glenn Lundy is, obviously, right?
Yep.
So I heard him at when we were in ADA. He just finished with the Lou and Fred, and we were talking. He was talking about how technology moved from 1922 to 2022 over the last 100 years, and he said, "Mark my words, in the next 5 years, technology is going to move that same 100 years." So I know you're an advocate with embracing technology. But sometimes can there be too much, or maybe is technology used more to help to accelerate momentum or to create momentum, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I think that some people can take technology, like what I was, and to say it was obsession is probably downplaying it. I was so obsessed with simplicity and removing things. So we got everything connected at that Toyota store. And then and that's what I'm doing a lot of right now is what can I remove and how do we go fast? Because you can go faster by trying to complicate things and add technology, or you can go faster by removing things and just closing that gap between one space and another.
Right on.
And I think that's the deal. That's where I was able to really help out that Toyota store in the service department was there was so much redundancy. And I think that's one of these dichotomies, like, oh, here we go, another part of the tech stack. And they probably should, right? But everything should replace something else. And
yeah,
that's the one thing they do is they keep on stacking it on top of each other, but they don't, you have to give and take and remove. Okay, we're gonna put this in. What are you removing? Because if not, oh, now I got to copy and paste into 3 different things instead of 1 different thing, instead of just spending the time and making sure, okay, why doesn't this map to this? Do we really need to be using 2 systems simultaneously? Why can't we just get this system to work with this system?
And yeah, go ahead, Cherry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, makes sense to me. It seems to me like technology in the fixed ops department isn't quite as modern, I guess you could say, as some of the other departments. Now, did you deal with that differently as a general manager?
Yes. So, luckily I was in a store where they could 20 feet away had just gone through that for 2 years. So I could at least say, here, ask this person or ask this person. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and it's actually going to be harder and it's going to get worse. And you're going to be, what happens is everybody says, why are you doing this? Why? Everything was fine. No different than me leaving, right? Why? and sometimes I ask myself that when I'm having a challenging day.
Right.
But at the same time, it can be better and it should be better, right? And the customer deserves it. And at the end of the, like the last 6 to 12 months when I was working at that Toyota store, it was especially like a stark contrast because now this is basically like a startup at AccuTrade, but it got really easy to where there was so much automation. I guess it was getting bored. You're looking for things to disrupt, and the service drive was a big target because of all the huge revenue. And I'm like, there's, we started off with 3,000 ROs in 2016 or 17 or whatever. I stopped advertising in sales and I took it down to like 20 grand or whatever, which was 1/10 of what it was, and moved a large portion of that over to fixed ops because I wasn't trying to save money. I was just trying to grow that business. And now they're running 5,800 to 6,000 ROs out of that same service drive.
Wow.
And they don't, I think that with the technicians, the one thing the technology can do, because a lot of people say, well, you replace me with robots, and there's certain things that not everybody wants to be doing, but it's mostly the downtime. And and Russell, I'm going to share this with you, but I've got an FJ Cruiser that I work on myself, which is, my wife tells me he's in the best use of my time, but I started tinkering around with it, and I was putting this different nav system into it because it's an older truck, and I ended up taking the whole dash apart, right? So it's laid out all over my driveway. A 4-hour job turns into an 11-hour job for me. And, it's still not put back correctly, but every time that my wife kept coming on, she's like, hey, what are you doing? Are you coming in for dinner? I go, I'm just lost my train of thought. Hold on a second. I forget where I was. And then I got to go back and retrace my steps over and over again. So as I was going to lunch with Eric Torres, one of our technicians, I said, hey, when you're doing that, you're working on a car, you got dash pulled apart or wiring harnesses, and the ASMs come back and they're asking you questions. How do you get back mentally to, where you were? Because I said, I was working on this thing and it took me like 45 minutes to get back to go, okay, here's where I was. I go, and then about 60 minutes after that, somebody comes out, my daughter goes, hey, and takes me off track. And he starts like grinding his teeth and he goes, are you trying to mess with me? I'm like, we're going Longhorn. I go, no. Why? He goes, Brian, you don't have any idea how painful that is for all of us. And he goes, I guess nobody's ever said it like that. And I go, that has to just kill productivity. He's like, his face getting red. And he goes, that's crushes it. He goes, and nobody talks about that, but yeah, he goes, and then they're saying, why can't you still, exceed your labor time guide or do all these other things? And I'm like, okay, I get it. I said, so do we have a technician problem? Or if we eliminated that, would we have a technician problem? He goes, no. Now this is from him, right? And of course I've asked all the other ones because I'm trying to make sure I'm not crazy. So then I'm like, if I could just eliminate that, the interruptions, all the things that could be preloaded if we do a drivability concern thing on the BDC, we check it in. That's why I was drilling into it with you on that. It was like 6 months ago, step by step. And everybody's like, why do you want to know this so bad? From when they get out of the car to when they get to the ASM, why is this? They not checking the miles, not triple checking. How's it titled? Is it in the DMS the same way? Duplicate entries, spouse's name. Those paper cuts will cause us to bleed out. And then we wouldn't be able to take an appointment.
Gosh, so well said, man. So well said. What a great analogy. Perfect, man.
And I think that's the technician shortage. I think the technician shortage is from not bleeding the bubbles out of the brake line. And I was, that's one of the things that pained me too, because I was trying to build this Domino's pizza tracker for service. And we were they rolled out a piece of it, but we were so close. And it'll probably be 2 or 3 years before I get back to that piece of it. But
well, listen, it's like the only thing you can't get back is time, and because everybody, that's the fundamental challenge. Variable or fixed doesn't mean nobody has time, right? So when I'm talking to dealers, et cetera, I already know what it is. The 3 things. Russell, what is it? What does it do? And what's in it for me? And if it involves saving time, I'll sit down and listen. Because that's huge. You can't ever get that back. You can interrupt. You can do you can do whatever you want to. But if you knock down that time and make it more efficient, you've really done something. You're that kind of guy that does that. Okay, let me ask you this. What gets you up in the morning? What motivates you on a daily basis to achieve whatever that you want to achieve? What is your why?
Well, obviously my family, first and foremost.
Right answer.
Yeah. That was a pop quiz.
Yeah, that really was. Okay. Make sure your wife and kids.
This is recorded.
Yeah, exactly. We can edit that out. Right.
But I also feel like I've got an obligation, coming up in car business. Like I said this morning, I got, my onboarding was an ashtray license plate, and hey, there's a 60 or 70% chance you're not going to make it, kid. So, good luck. And no support whatsoever, just figure it out, and just absolute hazing. So it was more like a Navy SEAL type, real brutal type onboarding. That's why I spent so much time on onboarding, because I didn't want people to go through that, because the amount of people that will put up with that, they have that type of thick skin. That's just not the way it is. And really, I don't think that that's the right way to do it. It's not setting people up for success. It doesn't have to be that way, right?
No, you're setting them up for failure.
Right. And just because, and that's what happened all the time, is they would say, look, you're still getting more support than I did. You get more training than I did. Well, that doesn't make it right. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
that's right.
I feel like every single time that I've been promoted throughout my career, I made a commitment every single time somebody did something horrible to me, which there was many, that I would, why don't you just quit? Why are you going to put up with that? I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get myself in a position where I can do something about that, because I'm not going to allow that to happen when I'm in a role like that.
Man, that's amazing.
So I think that the same way now, I've had these amazing mentors that not everybody gets a chance to have. And I feel like it's an obligation that you got to pay it forward and share that knowledge with people that might not have a leader like I had, or leaders, many of them that mentored me, and I got to pay that information forward. And it's also about it, I'm all about profitability, but I'm not about doing it without delivering the experience. I'm not about doing it without delivering excellence, because they should go hand in hand, right? And when you give a subpar experience, but you still ask for all the money, that's not professional.
No.
And it's not cool. And I think that more people need to say that it's not cool, instead of celebrating it on social media about how, all the slang that goes around with cracking people and 30 pounders and all that stuff. It doesn't have to be that way. And I feel like if a bunch of us don't talk about that, that it can spin out of control, because then it becomes, the cool thing to do or acceptable, which it's not acceptable. And if the business goes that way, because it terrifies me, it's one of the reasons that it's one of the things on my decision tree of taking this job, is trying to make a dent in this industry, to have everybody that comes in, my kids, if my daughters wanted to get in the business, I love this business. And I think, and so many of us do, I don't want them to say, look at it like in a derogatory way. I want them to say, wow, that's super cool. That's so exciting. 10 years from now, they don't even know what the car business used to be.
Yeah. I remember early on, through my growth spurts, and I continue to learn and grow every day. And one of the things I know, you're a guy that gives back and pays it forward. Zig Ziglar said it best. And I had an opportunity to spend some time with him and do a devotional in his office before he passed away. It was really exciting, but awesome. I really do believe if you help enough other people get what they want, you're going to get what you want. People do want to know that they count, they matter. I talked a little that they make a difference. And you're the kind of guy that does that. And when you do that, they want to perform for you. They want to listen to you. And then you roll in an onboarding process like what you're talking about, that just solidifies that they do feel that way. And they're going to go to bat, and they're going to, because they want to do that for you. They want to be led. And you're that kind, this is what you remind me of. You are that kind of leader. You inspire and motivate people to pull out the best and to step out and to trust and to listen to you. You don't have to be the cheapest, right? You don't have to be the most expensive. It's all about building value, right?
Right. And my mentor, Dave Kaler, who's now he's COO of AutoNation, he used to tell me that when I left Jermaine back in 2011 and went with him to, he's already at AutoNation, but he said, Brian, so here's the way it works. He goes, we just agreed that we're going to work together and we're going to do amazing things together. He said, but it's like, I put a ring on your finger, you put a ring on my finger. So there's a commitment to eat, he went deep into the trust aspect of that, right?
Yes.
And because now I got an obligation, not just to you, but to your family and everybody else that affects. He said, but you have an obligation with your whole leadership team in the same way. So anybody that you bring in, anybody that you hire, you're making that promise, because it's not even a commitment, it's a promise that you're going to be there for them. And you telling them all these things you're going to do, that you're not just promising them, you're promising their kids, you're promising their spouse, you're promising all these different people. Man. It's a heavy burden. So if you don't feel comfortable promising that, don't hire them. Hire fire fast and hire slow.
Yeah, I think it's too many times in this. I think it's changing. I really do. I think there's a huge paradigm shift going on, and a lot of it's being pioneered by guys like you out there. But people watch and they listen, right? And when your actions match your words, that's when they're bought in. That's when they're bought in, hook, line, and sinker. Because to say something and do something entirely different sends a horrible, horrible message. And you're not the kind of, well, that's why you're at where you're at, I guess. I mean, and I also equally had mentors that really made me stretch, and it was really scary. Sometimes.
Yeah, Van Tile back in the day was legendary.
Oh man, talk about the most profitable privately held automotive group in the world, right? And of course, Berkshire
and the most intense.
Yeah. Oh man, listen. Yeah. Back then, to even work at a store, like I remember a Toyota store I was at, Toyota Richardson back in '92. That emerald green cloth or leather tan interior. Oh my gosh, that thing
gold
was
package.
Like, oh my gosh. I mean, yeah,
pinstripe.
Yeah, you couldn't, and I don't even know if people would believe this today. You would, obviously, but you didn't let a customer walk. You would get a warning the first time. That's it. You couldn't work at particular stores. They just wouldn't have you. And if you had you didn't even go to the desk unless you had a commitment. If you couldn't get it, then you had to touch the desk. You had to excuse yourself. You had to find the right verbiage. But I mean, those uplogs every day were the Bible, write-ups to ups. I mean, just it's all numbers, right? And I learned that's when my career in automotive was really defined with Cecil and Larry Van Tile and that process. I mean, it was. We're not talking about me. We're talking about Brian. But thank you.
But it's so crazy. I was thinking about this recently, and I think I said it at one of these. It was right at the beginning of COVID or pre-COVID, And I was talking about test drives, and I said, now I've got this data, and for 20 something years, I've terminated people over what you're talking about, right? And you didn't go on that test drive. You put the customer out by themselves multiple times. You had demos back then. You're gonna have to ask the customer to give you a ride home because you're not going to be working here anymore. And I've been on that on both sides. It didn't feel good, and I still have some bad memories about having to do that.
Yeah.
But that was just the way.
Yeah.
And then when right around COVID, we started using digital retail and sales. We could actually quantify what percentage of the, with iPad selling, iPads have a speed sensor on them. And this part I didn't share.
I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah.
So you could share that with the team, but I told them, I said, you know what? I don't want anybody to know that. Not that because I'm trying to do some secret covert stuff. It's because I didn't want them to affect the placebo, I guess.
Yes.
So I wanted to see what it really was for myself. What I always wanted to know, what's the impact of test drives? I always heard 78%, 87% is what, all the closing ratios and what has to happen. But it wasn't like that, right? So I'm looking at it, and they're driving around the building. They're not going on the designated route. I'm losing my mind, but I can't say anything because I'm going to affect the test, right?
Yeah.
But I'm realizing after, I think it was 5,000 of these things, that it was just all over the board. There was no rhyme or reason to it. But selection, if they selected the right vehicle back when we had inventory, that drove the numbers like we thought test drives did. So if they selected the right vehicle the first time, it skyrocketed, right? I think it was like 68%. If they had to switch into a second vehicle, it dropped into the 30s. And then if they had to switch into a third vehicle, it was like in the single digits closing ratio wise. And I'm like, so we should have just been spending all the time on selection instead of punishing people and think about all the stress and all the things that we did to people about test drives. And it wasn't even a lead measure that drove results.
It's
like thinking the world is flat, but it's not being willing to admit that it's round.
Yeah, that was so crucial, man. We could spend a whole segment on that alone. The things I learned back then really helped define me. And I had a mentor shortly after that because I didn't have really the best habits back in those days. And a mentor that I sought out was willing to work with me. And I say this all the time. Sometimes I'm not familiar with who hears it or who doesn't, but when certain people hear it, they go, wow, that's great. So he said, Russell, are you willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do so that you can have and become the things that most people will never have and never become? What are you willing to do? Because you quit listening to those people. Most of those people I grew up and around, they told me, you can't do that. I tried that. That won't work. And they got interrupted by people like you and I and Charity who just did make it work. So I stopped listening to those people a long time ago. And my life really, really changed. But the discipline I learned from Van Tile, it was phenomenal. Obviously,
you're not allowed to think those thoughts.
Yeah. Huh?
You're not even allowed to think those thoughts in that kind of culture. You can't even talk about things like that out loud on why things aren't going to work.
Nope, not at all. I mean, it was, yeah. As a matter of fact, there's we talk about this off the channel, some stuff going on right now with Larry Van Tile.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to tell you about a workshop we're holding at NADA 2023. We're covering how EV adoption rates will impact fixed operations in the future. We'll show you real and meaningful data that might just put you at ease. Or maybe not. You'll have to come see. Come join us at our workshop, How Electric Vehicles Will Change Fixed Operations. We'll see you there. You've mentioned a few things so far, Brian, but what do you think some of the things are that dealerships are commonly struggling with right now? Is it EV? Is it staffing shortages? Tell us your perspective.
So I look at things a little bit differently. The EV thing is coming, right? But I think it's geographic. So like in California, it's obviously more of an issue than it is in Florida and in certain, it's different areas. But
good point.
I do think that across the board, the number one issue, and everybody wants to try to figure out some secret sauce or Road to El Dorado or Ponce de Leon's Fountain of Youth, but the simplest the hardest thing is to roll your sleeves up and remove the friction from the process. We know all the things that cause the friction. Not preparing the BDC reps with the right information to answer the questions correctly and build a knowledge base and not stop them to do that with the check-in process and having to get information. I had and they're, nowhere near what I'm about to say now. And I think, Russell, you were at that meeting, but I had a digital transformation VP for, I think, Honeywell or something, comes in for service. And every time he came in for service, he said for 18 months in a row, every 6 months, he bought another car. He goes, every single time you guys come over, ask me what my car is worth. I'm like, I don't want to. Are you sure? Here, we just appraised it. It's like, what? He goes, and I just keep trading. He goes, and I trade pretty much, in the time it takes to get the oil changed. And he said, I could buy a car here in 37 minutes, 45 minutes. He said, you got all my stuff in the system. And we spent years, obviously, to get it to that point.
Yeah, because that's not the norm. Yeah.
No, and there's a lot of, everything has to go in concert, but the end, and they have to be a previous customer in order to do that. But they still do it in maybe an hour and 10 minutes. But he said, he goes, I can't get my oil changed that quickly here. He goes, ever. He said it takes an hour and a half. He goes, it's like there's a digital Berlin Wall. He goes, I schedule my appointment online, and then I come in, but it's in since the car's in my wife's name, they can't look it up. My car sits out there for 20 minutes while they're trying to figure out whose car it is, and all the other things that go along with that. So storyboard it out, and that's the one. That's the thing that nobody wants to do, is sit down with a customer like that and really listen to them. And I remember whenever they saw me with a customer, they go, "Oh my God, who let him get to a customer?" Right, because they know what's going to happen, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm going, so then what happened? Then what happened? And an upset customer is more than happy to tell you in graphic detail every single step. I'm doing a legal pad, and then of course I'm going to bring the whole management team in. Hey, meet Randy. He just went through this. Here's the whole deal, and this is each pain point, and we're going to attack these 3 biggest, and then we'll go to the next 3 and the next 3. And it's slow, it's painful, it's like water torture. And it's not exciting. It's not something you can buy and put a widget on your website,
Sure,
which is what everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
And I think that, Charity, to your point, the future of the car business is people, not technology. You have technology to remove the administrative tasks.
Thank you.
To be able to have people connect with people more. They don't need to be in a back room loading data or not, none of that stuff should have to be typed in double entry. The ASM should be looking at the person, and they shouldn't have to type this in. Hold on a second. Now they're looking over here, and then doing all this, a RO with 16 pages for what, or a rental car agreement that's 8 pages long, all paper, the same stuff on every single page instead of condensing it all. Nobody wants all that. That's what technology is for, is to remove all of that so that people can just connect with people.
Yeah. It's like technology. I hear some, technology take the place of all the paper waste, and yet it's increased, but yeah, with all the pages, that really is a good question. And in the end, just like it starts out, it's all about people, right? People like you, trust you, believe you, they're going to buy from you, and they're going to want to do business with you, and they're going to keep coming at. It's that personal experience, that one-on-one. And I do know about change is really tough. And personally, I found in my life, the times where I resisted it the most is exactly where I needed to change. That's why I was resisting it the most.
That's right. That's dead right.
Yep.
So what would you say your leadership style is on the dealership side, and now with cars.com? We've heard a little bit about it, but tell us what you think.
So I think it's different now than what it was. It used to be more direct, or I don't know, direct, but it was less collaborative. Now I can't just say, here, you're going to do this, or try to do it all myself. It's impossible. So I have to get it done through others. So I have to slow down and ask everybody what they think. So it's more of a coach or a teacher than as much as I would love to be a wartime general. I just can't.
I can see you might have a little bit of that quality in you. Okay?
Dictator.
But, right. And I used to be, but you have to, and I would just put in processes here. You don't like this, here's this penalty. And I'm just going to make it more and more painful and just, thump it. But then they would just do it until I left. And then as soon as I left, it would revert back to the way it was versus, like we talked about this morning. I eventually got to the point where, with some people that I trusted and they were coming to me, which is tough because they knew I was going to be defensive. They knew I was going to be reactive. And I was just going to say, no, how about we talk about, your shortcomings, and let's talk about all the appointments you haven't set today. Cause you always try to flip the script. Don't come in here when you haven't done what you needed to do, is immediately where my mind used to go, versus, so why do you say that? And what brought you to this conclusion? Because I know now that it's not easy for them to approach me and tell me that they disagree with me and that they don't think it's the right thing to do. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, right? And a lot of strength to be able to do that. So it's also an obligation you have to your associates, is to hear them out. And what I found is more than half the time, they'd come up with a better solution. I didn't have to stay up all night writing out processes, coming up with all this stuff just for everybody to tell me that's never going to work. So which causes you to get defensive, because you spend a lot of time, you get some cost bias building all this stuff out. And so at one point, in a fit of frustration, I'm like, look, this is the best that I could come up with. I'm at my wit's end. If you have a better way to do it, then, give me back a revised version or something to that effect. And if everybody agrees that it's a better way to go, we'll go with that. But until you do that, this is the way we're moving forward.
I love that.
The bulk of people will look at that and they're like, that's way too much work. It's less work just to do it. Yeah. But the next up and coming leaders will look at that and they'll really improve on it. And we have these certain non-negotiables. I keep on saying had at the Germain Toyota store.
Right.
And I didn't write any of them. They took like a basic structure and made them like 3M all better, but they're still sitting right behind the sales tower. And they're like their constitution or their constitutional amendments. It's how they live. It's like their religion, and they created it. It's their Bill of Rights, if you will. Yeah. And I give them some ideas, but they finished it.
I love that. So you said something I'd like to dig just for a minute, because you would like to just tell them, but you've learned to listen to them, and particularly if they have a solution. If they bring a challenge to you and they have a solution. So was there a defining moment that you might be able to, find, or a set of circumstances where you learned to become that different kind of leader? Did something happen in your life where that happened, where you said, stop, something's going to have to change and it's going to have to be me, or whatever? Was there anything like that happened?
Kind of. So I used to be really paranoid, because by having that command and control style, I would see the results the next day. And I'm like, there's no way but there's some things you can't quantify, right? Unless you're standing there observing, there's no way that things aren't happening. So what would I do? I would go to act like I was leaving for the day, and I'd drive over to, some place across the street, have dinner. And then I would come back through behind the parts department, and I'd walk back through and then walk back in the showroom, like, hey, but I wouldn't say anything, but I would also hear what was going on. And what was being said at the sales tower wasn't what we talked about, but it wouldn't be like that if I was, hovering around and walking around the store during the day. So of course I lose it. And on this one individual, and I'm,
I wouldn't have wanted to been there then,
but I'm sitting there taking it like a lie, which is not how it was. He just didn't want to deal with me by saying he disagreed with me. It was easier to just say yes and not do it. And what I realized, I guess it took me a minute, and you asking that question to realize it. What I realized is that that's that artificial harmony, right? Oh yeah, everything's great. It's perfect. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. All about it. You got it done. And then it doesn't happen. You're like, what's going on? Then you start questioning the strategy. We talked about this morning, strategy or is execution? And then you start questioning the strategy when you should be focused on the execution. But if you don't trust that person, you don't know which way to go. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to tell you. So it's like this vicious cycle. Yep. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you end up not talking. It's a bad relationship, and it's toxic, and no differently than with parents, it percolates down through the whole sales org and the service org, and everybody knows it, but nobody wants to talk about it. So almost painfully, actually not almost pain, it was painful.
It was,
whenever we brought people into the conference room, it was like a purgatory type deal. Like, look, okay, that's the issue. Let's get this person. We're going in there, and it got to the point, and sometimes the last day of the month, if there was some, depending on the severity of the issue, we'll shut the whole place down. I said, I don't care if we sell another car until we figure this out. And they're like, no. So when they got to the point, and I don't know, it's probably not like that, anymore, because it was probably too far off the end. But they would proactively towards the end say, look, here's the process that I'm going to propose. Here's the solution. Already before I even asked the question, I'm thinking this option or this option. You tell me what you think, but I'm not going in there. And I don't want to go through all the different things with anybody else. Just tell me what you think and get back to me, because I'm going to go, I got to sell some cars. And my service director was, had even less tolerance for it. But we got significantly better. But what happened is, I guess the pain of walking me through, or me walking them through the current reality, what's the action steps needed, what's your desired result, what has to happen to get from here to there. They all realized the self-guided discovery. Well, I can just do that without sitting in a room with you for 3 hours, going through it in slow motion. Yep. I'm just going to do it and give it to you, which made my life 10 times easier and made them all amazing leaders.
Excellent.
That's excellent.
That was a really, really great. I find that key moments in my life, in relationships, when I get frustrated or troubled, it's really all me anyway. I'm thinking that the grand illusion is that, and I still have it today, that I can control people, places, and things. And actually I can't. I can control how I act and react to those things. But so if I want something to change in some relationship that I'm in, I usually find that if I look inside and I make a couple of tweaks, it appears that everything has changed, and really I'm the one that's changed, and everybody's just taking their lead from me. Works out really, really well.
And when you have trust, people will share that with you, because if not, you don't even know.
Yes, they will. You've come a long way. I didn't get a chance to ask, because I know we're getting close here, but you're married and how many kids, et cetera, right?
I'm married to my high school sweetheart.
Oh, that's so awesome, man.
I put her through hell and back, moving from this market to that market to, she's she's my left tackle in football analogies. She keeps me freed up, and I wouldn't be able to do anything I do without her. And my daughters wouldn't, have 4.2 GPAs and be doing everything they're doing athletically.
So how many kids do you have?
I got 2 daughters, a 15-year-old and 15 and 11.
Wow.
Excellent.
Wow. Yeah. Behind every good man is a great woman.
That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. True. Your childhood sweetheart. That doesn't happen a lot. So that is awesome.
So I don't think she fully knew what she was signing up for. It was like not a full disclosure deal.
So, but you educated her over the years, right?
Yeah, she tolerated a lot early on.
Yeah,
she's the same.
They do. Especially in this bit in car business, right? I mean, it can be extremely demanding, particularly early on when we get it. We want to climb that ladder and we're chasing the dream, et cetera, and still trying to balance, wife and time and family and, activities, et cetera. It's a juggling act. And I got to tell you, I got a lot of it wrong myself too, but I get it right today. I got 4 grandkids, and all my kids live within 9 minutes of me, and my son followed it. Yeah, I'm telling you, man, it is. I get goosebumps just thinking about it, because I literally almost see them every single day. Well,
that's what you put all the work in for, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I know my daughter's volleyball season is starting in about 10 days. So I've been burning the candle at both ends, because I know I've got a limited window when I'm planning that out. Because initially, coming over the cars,
I can see you doing it too. You're strategizing, right? This is Brian. We got to make this work, juggle this. I love it, man.
Right. There's only 86,400 seconds in a day. There's what are we going to do between here and here? But right now, it looks like to a lot of people, they go, I thought you were going to work less and attend all your kids' sporting events. And that is true. But I think that a lot of people underestimate the work that it takes initially to go into something. And you don't just get a job. And I think this is very important. I wish somebody would have explained this to me earlier. You don't just get promoted and then, you're on the mountaintop, plant the flag, and, I made it, right? That's like the base camp. And now the party is just beginning. And now all of a sudden it's going to be like a sheer vertical cliff.
Yeah.
It's just where I'm at. Now, my wife might say, why did you choose to do this? everything was completely fine, which is about the 11th time we've had that conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, almost 30 years, but not at the end of all of this, in 2 weeks or whatever, it won't be like that anymore. But you do have to put in, and I know you guys know this, but you got to put in the work to be able to have the privilege to be able to do things like this.
It is, and it is a privilege, and it does take work and prioritizing, and there's no manual or handbook. We figured out, I know each rung of the ladder that I got a little higher in, I didn't realize the tremendous amount of responsibility, and to go from, thinking selfish, self-seeking and self-centered to thinking about people and people's lives, and making sure that they earn a living and give them the opportunity. I mean, on and on and on, which, you elaborated on, which you're obviously very good at.
No, but I was very bad at it, because I've been in situations going into the recession where I had too much staff. And these are some other things, the majority of the people that I was just working with, only a handful had been in the business prior to 2011. So they'd never seen a down market. And then there was maybe a smaller handful that had been in the business prior to the recession. So a lot of them have never experienced adversity like that professionally. And
Gosh, tremendous pressure, isn't it?
Yeah. And I know that back during the recession, I had too much staff, too much inventory, too much everything, right? So it changes you forever throughout that moment. But a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to hold this person accountable. To your point earlier, Russell, hopefully, and you just hope that they're going to come out of this, even though it's the past performance is a clear indicator of future behavior, and they can't correct what they don't know about. And you have an obligation to have that conversation with them so they don't terminate.
That's right.
But what happens is I wasn't doing that at one point, and when the recession hit, there was a stack of blue folders, and I didn't have a lot. I mean, it was the worst day I've ever had professionally. I don't remember how many it was. It just was all day of all these things, because we had to right size the store, and I had been bloated in that moment, and it wasn't being responsible to all the other people on the team. So either it was going to get their pay cut or that, but it was no good situation. I could have been proactive and not put us in this situation, but it was hope that versus reality that causes you to not see around that corner.
Yeah, that was a tremendous ripple effect, wasn't it? And then we get blindsided with the pandemic, another one, obviously. Yeah. So, wow. But
every problem's an opportunity to disguise.
Thank you.
There we go.
How
How about we cheer things up a little bit, Russell?
Okay.
How about we go to some quick
Well, I thought this was all cheerful, right? This is how we learn.
Well, these are kind of fun, off-the-wall, oddball questions that maybe you don't expect. They're meant to be pretty quick and, get to know you a little bit more. So what is your favorite childhood memory?
Wow, that's a really good question. I guess going on vacations with my family.
Wow. Good answer.
I'll tell you actually a funny story. Part of the reason why I probably am the way that I am, and there's many examples like this, but I don't come from a lot of money, and grew up in the south side of Chicago. But when we used to go down to Florida when I was growing up, we'd get in a conversion minivan, Starcraft conversion.
Yes, I remember
right, with the blinds.
Oh yeah.
But we'd go down, and my father didn't want to pay for Disney tickets, right? So we'd go to the timeshare people would be there, and hey, you could come on into the Black Angus, and we could take you through a presentation. You get some free Disney tickets back then, like $28 or whatever. So he would do that, and then the next morning we'd do it for breakfast again. And it was, by the time I got done with every one of these vacations, every time somebody said it, he goes, yeah, let's go. So my mother and my sister would sit in the car, and they're like, after they'd eat, and then that was it, right? And he goes, look, mister, you're going to be sitting here with me. Don't go anywhere. So I just sit through, I don't know how many dozen years and probably 40 something 2-hour timeshare presentations, TO after TO after TO. And I sit there, and my aunt told me, I negotiated a Nissan deal for her recently. And she said, oh my God, I told my father, Michael, and she said, I told my brother, Michael, that, what are you doing to that kid? What's that going to do to him psychologically? When he's older. And she was, I'm just glad it worked out for me. But, I think a lot of those moments define you, and all that constant negotiation, there's something that you absorb from that.
Yep.
It's not the way he intended it to be, but it was a fun memory, I guess.
That was
Yeah,
great. That was
for
great.
sure.
Good response to that one. Thank you.
What are 3 books or movies that you'd recommend to our audience and why?
So from a book standpoint, my 3 favorite books, and they're coaching business books, but the first one would be The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. And early on in my career, for whatever reason, I read that, and a lot of it, I related to a lot of the things that he was going through at those moments of time. But he was really, really vulnerable in that book, and he really opens himself up as to what he was really thinking. And you would never know that from the outside. And they win all those Super Bowls, the 49ers in the 80s, and getting Joe Montana and all of those things, but all the things he questioned. And he thought he was going to get fired when, that blindsided them, because he was so hard on himself and the team. And it was, he was just chasing perfection so much. But his whole thing is he had the standard of performance. So I took that really to heart and drew one out, and I still have it to this day. But if everything's defined, he was defining how are they going to answer the phone? And the media was horrible to him because and he knew attention to detail. If they were going to do everything with excellence, it had to start with how they answered the phones, no shirt tails hanging out. They couldn't, all the things that were negative connotations. He had to let go of a lot of players that had talent, but they weren't culture fits and they're morally and ethically sound. So that's a blueprint. If the premise is if you do everything, all the basics, the blocking and tackling, he never looked at the scoreboard. He just had to look at how they were executing, and the score would take care of itself.
It does, doesn't it? Well,
and then Above the Line by Urban Meyer, and then The 4 Disciplines of Execution by Stephen Covey. Compelling scoreboard, lead measures, lag measures, cadence of accountability. Those 3 books.
Excellent. Thank you. Any movies come to mind?
My favorite movie is Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, or Scarface, but if I'm watching a movie, I mean, I guess I still do watch. There's some movies like The Firm and great things like that, but you can't get much better than Heat. Or I watched The Godfather 2
over and over,
right?
And over, right?
And there's so many life lessons in that movie.
Oh,
all those.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
So your last one is, you kind of answered this all already, but we'll see. What advice would you, if you could, give your 18-year-old self?
I love that question.
I do too.
I don't know. And that's a really hard question. I don't know that I would just enjoy the ride. I don't think I would change anything. I've been through some horrible adversity. Everybody always just looks at the what's happening now. But I mean, I got 2 ulcers, and
the end product.
I had a business, nightclub that went out of business. That was, it was beyond stressful, and over. And every 3 years I would get in, I'd have a store fixed, and then all of a sudden, hey, we're shipping off to this one, or okay, that one's good. Now this one's even worse. Let's see what you do with this. And by the way, we're going to pay you less. And over and over for 2 decades. Right.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change anything. Right. No matter how many horrible times and nights, multiple nights till 2 a.m. pricing cars and thinking that I can hit the number and stressed out to this end and that end. Everything happens for a reason, good or bad. And I wouldn't change anything. And actually I don't think I would even need to give myself advice, because the mentors that I had gave me better than that.
Yeah. That was a great one. And I think about, if myself was giving my 18-year-old self some advice, my 18-year-old self wouldn't listen anyway. He would end up doing it his own way, right? So
nice one, Russell.
So Brian, we are humbled and honored to have you today. And in closing, you have the floor. You can say, recommend anything you want. You say anything to anybody, offer some advice, etc. But what would you like to say in closing?
I would just say thank you both for what you're doing for the industry, because I think this is the conversation that needs to be shared. I think that everybody needs to know that even though the profits are very strong right now, and that's great, it's not going to be like that forever. And right now is the time to invest back in your people. It's the time to invest in technology and do it before you have to. It's kind of like the digital retail tools. Everybody was saying, hey, why are you doing that? And what, to criticizing everybody. And all of a sudden COVID hit. And then overnight, they all had 90% market share.
Imagine that.
And that is going to happen in some other way. And you don't ever know what it's going to be, but you've got to train all the time, military trains, and we need to do the same thing for the industry, but we're at a pivotal point in the automotive industry. It can go one way or another. It can go to a commoditized deal, or we can keep the soul of this amazing industry, but we've got a responsibility that we've got to not abuse it, or neglect it. And we've got a moral responsibility to leave it better than we found it for all those coming behind us.
Yep. That's well said. Talking Cherry, many people, but I remember so when websites first came on the scene, I was running a Nissan store, and we were probably 6 months, later adapters than, but it was scary, right? A website. And back then we had the real fast AOL dial-up modems. I must tell you, they were super fast.
I remember he said, you got mail and you got to go stop the clock so that the lead, right?
Right.
Then you didn't have to respond to the customer. You just had to stop the clock.
That's right. I mean, it was so foreign, but then this company came out of the woodwork called Autovitel. And this is 1990, and we had a protected territory. And I'm telling you,
Autovitel salesperson.
Were you really? You probably sold us back 9 out of 10 of those leads that we'd get with our protected area. They were like gold. And I'm telling you, it happened in the downturn. It happened during the pandemic. It's happening now with people freaking out about EV, but they thought that dealerships were going to change forever. But you know what?
And they said that's the end of salespeople.
Yeah. But we're overcomers. We adapt. Yeah, we talk about it. This is not going away. We're going to adapt and overcome, aren't we, Brian?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
They told me in 1998, whenever that came out, and I was selling it on the dealership side, but I had a bunch of people, they said, hey, pat me on the back. I'm so sorry, kid. You should have been here when it was the good old days. And they said,
the Sands of Belt days.
Right. That's right. It was from my used car manager with Sands of Belt with a cocktail in his hand.
Yeah, exactly.
He said, you should have been in the business 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because, and if he only, you look back in retrospect, I don't know what he's doing now, but the good old days are right now. I mean, it's the best it's ever been.
That's right. I absolutely agree. Now, listen, for all of you out there listening, first of all, once again, Brian Kramer, we are really honored and humbled to have you on. Charity, thank you so much. She is an awesome, she's the one that put all this stuff together. But I want to say this in closing. I hope for you, when this comes out, you'll hear this report. You need to listen to each and every one of these, because I'm going to tell you, yeah, you think you know Brian Kramer and you've seen him here on this podcast. You've seen him there on that podcast. I'll bet you get some tidbit of information that you didn't get on the others to help understand the well-rounded Brian Kramer that was on here today. So like him, love him, share him, our podcast, what he's doing with being the executive vice president of CarStop, et cetera, whatever. We thank you all for another successful episode of WTF, and that's what the Fixed Ops to you all.
Thank you, Brian.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on WTF, and that's what the Fixed Ops. We're working hard to bring you a strong lineup of automotive experts in our up and coming schedule. Did you know we're also available on all your favorite podcasting destinations? If you didn't, you do now. Try it out, and while you're there, leave us a review. We encourage you to do that. It really helps spread the word. Thanks again, and we appreciate your support.